And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is time to answer the age-old question, or I don't really know how old of a question it is, but to answer the question, is Grimgor Ironhide still a meme? So in this video today, guys, we're going to be getting Grimgor Ironhide and having him duel a multitude of lords from varying factions. So there's going to be some Chaos Lords, some Wood Elf Lords. Not every single lord that is kind of a good candidate will be in this video, but for the most part, we'll probably have about 6 or 7 duels for you guys to kind of see the new Grimgor in action. We'll see if he wins, we'll see if he loses, and we'll hopefully draw a conclusion from there. So here, if we look at Grimgor real quick, we can go ahead and take a look at his new stats. He does have the best of the best. So this gives him melee defense and also gives him ward save when an enemy lord or hero is nearby, making him a pretty potent duelist. On top of that, he does also have your next. This is a really powerful debuff, very much in the vein of Hunter of Champions with Wulfric, lowering melee attack and melee defense and speed. That's really, really powerful. On top of that, he does have Gitsnick for 50% armor-piercing damage, melee attack. And last but not least, he does have the Bloodforged armor, which certainly isn't bad. This is going to be giving him a bonus armor, which can help against lords with relatively low AP values, and even against lords who do, of course, have good AP. Some of their damage will not be armor-piercing. So on that note, guys, we're going to be jumping into our first duel here in just a moment, which is going to be Grimgor facing off against Archaon the Ever-Chosen. So something else to mention as we do jump into this video is if we're fighting a character that does have magic. So Archaon, for example, Durthu, they're not going to be bringing their magic, but they are going to be getting all of their items. So Archaon is coming in with Slayer of Kings, and the Crown isn't really pertinent to bring here in this matchup because it doesn't matter if he has immune to Psychic against Grimgor. So the battle is underway here, and the gold values of the various characters and how much has been spent on each character will also be up in the corners of the screen. So the duel is underway. Archaon against Grimgor, Slayer of Kings active, of course, making him an absolute beast. 844, charge bonus of 97. His melee stats also quite decent, but not when they're nerfed by your next. Grimgor is certainly coming for that booty. Now, if we look, Grimgor's buffs have worn off. His Gitsnick is worn off, and we're in our kind of second wave of cooldowns here, but Archaon, despite having 1,000 more HP than Grimgor, is actually losing this duel quite badly. He's at about 40%. Grimgor is just over 50%, around 60%. Granted, Archaon can certainly even out the duel. Slayer of Kings have just worn off, and it was had a longer duration than Grimgor's weapons group. But Grimgor's weapons honestly have a relatively quick cooldown from what I've seen. So you can see here 2,400 here, 27 on Archaon. So currently Archaon is still ahead. Grimgor, though, with the Bloodforged armor, going to be putting up to 150, which will help with some of the mitigation. So as we get later in these duels, we will do some fast forwarding to kind of spare you guys the Benny Hill of all of this. And you can see here, Archaon starts to lose 1,800, 2,200 on Grimgor. Grimgor's combat stats, 70 and 55 against 70 and 60. So Archaon's melee defense is slightly better, but Grimgor's weapon strength is higher. And Grimgor does also have a huge charge bonus for a foot character of 70 and gets that ward save from his buff, which is cool. Bloodforged armor once again. Archaon with Foe Seeker, and army losses will afflict the Ever-Chosen. And then it's going to be Grimgor actually winning his first duel. So he actually does defeat Archaon the Ever-Chosen in a straight-up fight. Now, of course, if you are a multiplayer, Archaon can cycle charge, he has more mobility, but again, we're just testing the combat prowess of Grimgor and what he's capable of in a vacuum. So guys, we'll see you in the next duel. And now, my friends, the next duel is going to be Grimgor against Kolok, and this is kind of like a bit of a benchmark test, but Kolok obviously has a massive advantage versus foot characters because he's monstrous, so he can basically knock them around non-stop. But I'm more so curious to see how deep Grimgor can really get. And obviously, if you took most of these duels and put them through, many tests, and yeah, Kolok there, unfortunately, I do have to test this with the AI because not too many players, of course, are here in the EA. But nonetheless, Kolok Suneater, despite not getting the charge, it doesn't matter too much. Grimgor getting hammered really bad. And this is kind of the eternal curse of these footlords, right? Just getting knocked over nonstop and not being able to fight back. And there again, he gets hit, he gets knocked over, probably took some damage. And that does waste the cooldown of a lot of his abilities. Now, I did do a couple duels here between these two characters, and a couple times Grimgor actually got relatively close. So we'll do some fast forwarding here so you guys can see and just spare you the Benny Hilling. But you'll see actually Grimgor starts to fight back a little bit, and when they sit in sustained combat and Grimgor isn't being knocked over, it suddenly becomes like a relatively even trade as it pertains to damage. The big issue here in this situation is Grimgor getting knocked over, but with the buffs, he actually gets Kolok pretty darn low. It also should be mentioned that Kolok does cost 600 more gold with all of his items equipped in the Star Crusher than Grimgor does fully equipped, so that is another variable in terms of cost effectiveness, but really it's just the characters getting knocked over, which is pretty unfortunate for sure. Something I'd like to actually see changed. If footlords didn't get knocked over at all even, I don't think that would be that bad. If they could get staggered, okay, but a character like Grimgor getting knocked over like this over and over, and look how well he did. Despite the fact that he's getting punted, he got Kolok down to 3,200 right here, which is pretty solid for sure. So he got some big damage there. And I did this fight a couple times just to really get a feel for it. And the closest Grimgor ever got, he lost pretty much all of them, but Grimgor did get Kolok down. And the other ones, Kolok did get his charge bonus, but this one was most kind of a well illustrating of the point here. Kolok, we got him down to I think 700 HP or 1,000. It was really close actually. So Grimgor certainly has a lot more teeth with that ward save. Anyways, guys, we'll see you in the next duel. All right, my friends, and now it's time for a grudge match. Now, this is one that Grimgor might have even won before he got the changes here, but nonetheless, it'll be interesting to see. So Thorgrim is a monstrous character, 5,700 HP, so he has a lot more than Grimgor. He has some pretty good debuffs with Oath of Vengeance. Now, Grimgor and him are, relatively speaking, in the same price range, but Grimgor has like massive AP values, and also with Gitsnik and all these abilities here, he certainly packs some punch. So immediately you can see the lack of AP on Thorgrim is showing for sure. But not only that, his combat stats are heavily lowered by your next. His melee attack is really low, much lower than Grimgor's melee defense, and his melee defense himself is super low. I mean, the minus 40 on that really gives Grimgor a huge jump here in this battle. So I'll fast forward a little bit, and you can see here Thorgrim is going to be taking a huge hammering, and Thorgrim is probably one of the more powerful dwarf duelists. Brindle is also quite good in Ungrim, but we'll be jumping over to Brindle in just a second. But you can see the fight versus Thorgrim is relatively one-sided. Grimgor really gives him the business. And now, my friends, we're here with the duel between Grimgor and Brindle. So Gromby is a little bit cheaper, so in terms of price ranges, it certainly does favor Grimgor. He's more expensive, right? But the Flash Bomb is here, and obviously I gave all the items to Gromby. The Rune Axe of Brindle, which puts his weapon strength up to 658, which is quite nice, but his melee defense is very low, while debuffed by Grimgor, and Grimgor seems to hold pretty firm. The melee defense buff he does get, and also the ward save buff, really mitigate a lot of incoming damage, and honestly, Gromby is really getting worked on here pretty bad. Despite his buffs, the Your Next buff is just so good in a duelist situation. And honestly, I mean, the fact that Grimgor has a slow now really makes him, like, if you just compare these characters in a vacuum, Brindle and Thorgrim, Grimgor is better than them. He can fight these monstrous characters and these really powerful, lords, and he also has this flow. So you can see here, he really puts a beating on Gromby. I did this fight probably about 3 or 4 times, and every single time Grimgor beat him by a pretty healthy margin. I think the lowest we got, Grimgor got down to like 40%, give or take, and you can see here, despite having Brindle has no fear, it keeps him going, but yeah, he's at 12 HP right now. And this might have actually been the one where Grimgor got the lowest, because I have a bunch of replays of all these different ones, but yeah. Nonetheless, Grimgor wins that pretty decisively. Brindle has no fear. You can see the mighty Warboss raises his axe and releases a Wa as he claims victory over pretty much the most powerful dwarven duelists. I did Ungrim as well. Ungrim did pretty well for himself, but nonetheless, him and Gromby kind of were in the same boat in terms of performance. So now, guys, on to the next duel. And now, my friends, we have Franz versus Grimgor. So this one, obviously, if Franz could cycle charge, it would heavily favor him. He could cycle charge all day and really abuse that, but just in terms of a vacuum fight, it's going to be interesting. So Franz has some insane items. Gall Miraz for AP damage, Reichland Runefang for melee attack and leadership. And you can see immediately out of the gates, Grimgor is taking a huge hammering. Granted, the debuff is now active. Your Next is here. His melee defense is really low at 27. Grimgor's melee attack is freaking 94. And this also negates Grimgor's charge bonus, so he doesn't get the charge here. But him and Franz, of course, in sustained combat. Franz has much more HP, but Grimgor is quickly evening the score. You can see 3,100 right here, Franz down to 24. And I must say, I'm very impressed with this. You can see Grimgor Ironhide, despite Franz still having his items active, they have a much longer duration, is actually starting to lose this duel, which is really nice to see. Because, obviously, the monster's characters can knock them over, but it doesn't seem like Franz has enough mass to really abuse that. And if you are forced into a vacuum fight with Grimgor, it's cool to see that he can actually punch back and do some serious damage. So the Bloodforged armor gives him 150 armor, and Franz will actually end up losing that duel, which is quite cool. And again, if you're playing in campaign or in multiplayer, Franz would simply be able to, just cycle charge and would have a huge advantage in that respect and could be more mobile and obviously hit and run, which would probably lead to Grimgor's demise if we were in a true multiplayer duel. But again, in a vacuum, old Grimgor probably wouldn't have won that. He would have had some serious problems without the itemization and the melee defense debuffs and all that sort of stuff. So there you have it, guys. Franz versus Grimgor. And here we have it, my friends. It's going to be Grimgor versus Turin. So Turin has all of his goodies, except Sunfang, because obviously the cone attack won't really be helpful here. But he does have Faint and Repose, Foe Seeker. He does also have the Heart of Avalorn for the Rebirth, but it's more importantly just to kind of see how they function in a duel. So Turin obviously has the mount, got a pretty good charge bonus, great combat stats, probably better in terms of well-rounded combat stats to Grimgor, but Your Next really does help mitigate the Faint and Repose. And right out of the gates, Grimgor is really getting in there. His weapon strength being higher, and obviously his charge bonus of 70 is like almost as good as Tyrion's, which is quite scary for sure. So Turin getting worked on in this duel pretty hard. I did do this one a couple times, and it was very back and forth. But for the most part, Grimgor always won the duel. He would always win the fist fight, like right out of the gates. However, if Turin gets his rebirth, then sometimes he was able to win the fight. But for the most part, Grimgor would win the fight, and then Turin would simply be able to recover with his rebirth ability and come back and win. But you can see even right there, he still gets it. Pulls the balance power back up towards half. But Grimgor's still chopping. He does have Gitsnik active, relatively short cooldown on that. And you can see Turin is getting whooped on once again and actually does just simply break. So that one was one that, like I said, Grimgor won the fight like every single time, but would eventually lose some of these fights due to the fact that Turin does have that rebirth, which is, you know, it's a circumstance that still comes into play, but you get to see like how Grimgor can go fisticuffs with one of the best duelists in the game, a character in terms of price ranges. And obviously if you have like Star Dragons and monstrous characters, Grimgor just kind of gets knocked over and it's a bit of a moot point. But nonetheless, against like characters that don't have monstrous mass, he's quite scary for sure. So now we're going to be trying out Grimgor versus a couple monstrous characters. We have Nakai and Throg coming up. I did do Gorok and some of the foot characters for the Lizard Men, and they just got crunched by Grimgor. He really gave him the business. But now we have the monstrous fight. Primal Roar, of course, is quite good. And yeah, I mean, this guy has really high weapon strength. Only a charge bonus of 24. Grimgor's charge bonus, much better. Also, something else we haven't really touched upon here in today's video is the fact that, you know, obviously the Greenskins are going to have the Wa in a lot of these situations, so that could help him win fights he would normally lose. Like had he had the Wa against Kolok, for example, could have been pretty impactful. Now, right out of the gates here, you can see Nakai actually putting a bit of a hurt on Grimgor, but Grimgor is pretty tenacious and durable. The Gitsnick coming off cooldown and, of course, the armor buffs allow him to actually get this fight back, and you can see Nakai actually starts to get beaten down. Grimgor does come back in the fourth quarter and is able to drop the base on Nakai, who breaks due to army losses. And I did this one a couple times. There was one, I think I did it 4 times, and Nakai, I think he won one of them. Obviously, there is some RNG with melee defense, but Grimgor did win the other 3 pretty substantially. So yeah, definitely no joke. Being able to take out a monstrous character like Nakai certainly isn't bad. And now, my friends, over to Throg. Now we're back in business. It is going to be Grimgor facing off against Throg Daddy. Throg has about 2,000 more HP, relatively similar weapon strength, frostbite, good combat stats. But again, Grimgor's debuffs and the ward save plus melee defense he gets, I feel like Grimgor wins a lot of these fights due to his combat stats. 94-55 against 36 and 10. I mean, despite, you know, Throg having stronger weapon strength and more HP and regeneration, I think that could edge out in the long, really kind of RNG game, right? That is melee defense versus melee attack. So you can see here, Throg really getting chopped down. I mean, obviously Throg isn't heavily armored, so the AP isn't a big variable, but Grimgor is able to really neutralize the HP difference very quickly. And I did this one a couple times, and Grimgor was able to perform in a pretty similar manner almost every time. When his abilities come off cooldown, he really beats the brakes off Throg. Throg got him very low in one, but I did this one 4 times as well, and Grimgor pretty much won every single time. So there you have it, guys. Grimgor going deep on these monstrous characters. So just to give you guys some kind of variance here in this video, we have Grimgor fighting a monstrous character again, like a true monster. So we have Cetra. Cetra is not going to be using his magic, but he has all of his items. You can see he's getting quite crunk here, and the problem again is Grimgor gets knocked over, but nonetheless, Grimgor is giving some damage back, but that is a big point difference. I believe Cetra on his mount here is 3,200 and Grimgor is like 2,200. So it's a pretty big point difference. And really, I mean, Grimgor is not doing bad if you really look at the circumstances. I'll get back here, keeps him going. He's taking a bit of HP off Cetra, and he's able to hold. And this is the eternal curse of the Footlords, but you know, if this were like a multiplayer battle or something, you'd have some reinforcements, some archer shooting. And really, at the end of the day, if you have 3,200 gold investing in 2,200, there's going to be other assets on the battlefield under your control that are going to be able to do a little bit better for themselves. So Grimgor will be losing this fight pretty one-sided. I mean, he got Cetra down to about 55%, give or take, which isn't bad, but still, it's really tough for him to win these monstrous fights. But we have one left, which is actually Durthu, and you guys are going to be quite interested to see that one. And now, my friends, we have Grimgor closing out this video against Durthu. So this is an interesting one. Durthu doesn't seem to have the same mass to really punch over a character like Grimgor nonstop, so it becomes a pretty good fight. Now, Durthu has exponentially more HP, over 7,000 to start with. His combat stats are pretty good, but Grimgor does actually have an advantage in the general combat stat department. 94, 55, 675 currently with his Gitsnick active, and the Bloodforged armor does also give him a little bit of extra armor against Durthu. Durthu's mostly AP damage, but he does have some normal damage as well, so obviously that does help. So the fight continues here. Grimgor continues chopping away at this tree, and I did do this one, I think I only did this one like 3 times just because I felt like it was a bit of a foregone conclusion with the monstrous units, but Grimgor does use Get Back here, which keeps him going. And you can see Durthu's actually 2,900. Grimgor is just kind of sub 1,000 here, but I did do this one 3 times. Durthu won twice. And this, of course, as you guys can probably infer, is going to be one of his victories here. But Grimgor was also able to win that on one of the duels. He actually was able to chop down Durthu, which is super impressive. Now, had this been, you know, maybe 10 times, I think Grimgor would maybe win like 3 or 4 times in total. But really not a bad performance against a monstrous character that is pretty expensive to boot. But of course, you know, there's magic and different, you know, variables like that. But ultimately, that is the video for today. So you guys got to see Grimgor in action. Certainly much better. Many of those duels, he would have lost to Archaon, he would have lost to Tyrion, he would have lost to many of those characters beforehand, probably pretty handedly. But after getting those debuffs and the new items and some of these abilities he now has, he's actually a contender. And the fact that Grimgor has Slow now, in conjunction with his better combat prowess and better durability, I really would like to firmly say I don't think Grimgor is a meme anymore. Now, I don't know if he's going to be the best pick on the greenskin roster, but I think he's clear of the meme department. I actually think Grimgor has some teeth. The ability to slow things down by 48% while also neutering their combat stats is extremely good, especially for the greenskins. So there you have it, my friends. That is Grimgor's dueling video. Hopefully you enjoyed seeing him go fisticuffs with some of the best that the old world has to offer. And again, I know, obviously with magic and cycle charging, it becomes a different game, but it was fun just kind of seeing him in action in terms of how he can scrap in just a pure fisticuffs fight. So thank you so much for joining. Hopefully you guys are enjoying this early look at some of the greenskin reworks, and we'll be back with more content soon. Take care.